Do we have a couple people joining by phone only?
Yeah.
Oh, Bill just sent me a message.
Untitled Chapter.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. We're just going to give people a few more minutes to join here. Probably get started within maybe like 4 or 5 minutes.
Eddie Maltz here. I'm going to go on mute.
Morning.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Just fine.
Great.
Hey,
Just making sure everybody's awake. Although I think we have some people in Europe. They probably, it's probably late for them. So good morning, everybody. Just we're giving everybody just a couple minutes here to get into the meeting. We'll start momentarily. If there's anybody on the phone who we can't see in the attendee list here and is just calling in, if you could let us know, that would be great.
Andy Maltz here. I'm on mute.
Okay, Andy's on the phone.
JZ here. I can only dial in via phone today.
Sounds good.
I'm Michael LaFonte here.
Good to have you, Mike.
Yeah, it's Michael LaFonte.
Thanks, Mike.
Greg Chachu here.
How you doing, Greg?
Good, thank you.
Alex, Andy here. If when you're ready to start, if you could read off the attendees for those of us that can't see a computer screen, just so we know who else is on the phone, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start that now since it's probably about time to get going. So currently online we have myself, Scott Dyer. Two people seem to be in, and it says waiting for name. I don't know whether that's just an error or whether they're sort of slowly getting into the meeting here. We've got Bill Mandel, Chris Clark, Doug Walker, Don Eklund, Florian Bell, Greg Chaccio, Joseph Goldstone, Michael Chenery, Michael Chido, Mike Smith, Peter. I'm going to mess your name up here, Peter. Peter Rixner. Is that how you say that? Ray Feeney, Remy Archid, Redo Cromer, Steve Tabankin, and Thomas Menskal. And then on the phone we have Andy, JZ, Mike LaFuente, and Greg was also on the list here online. So I think Thad is probably getting in here momentarily as well. He's one of our facilitators, presenters, along with Bill. So hopefully he'll be joining us momentarily. But maybe I'll just sort of go through the beginning stages here. This is sort of a new concept for us, this virtual working group, and kind of opening this up to more of a public audience, as well as pretty much anybody on ACES Central who's been paying attention. What we're really focusing on here today is the output device transforms and some development that we want to do around output device transforms. Just to let everybody know, I am recording this, and I will be recording this until, we'll be posting this after recording it so that others who couldn't attend the meeting live can see what the discussion was about and stay up to date on our progress. We do have this little, let's see if I can get through here. Oh, sorry. There we go. We do have this little statement about our participation guidelines. To be summed up, be nice, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a link here to the full rules, which are posted on ACES Central. But generally speaking, we're just saying that this is a public meeting, public disclosure, and be nice to everybody who's participating. We have an agenda here. I'm quickly going to do an overview of the virtual working group process. This, again, is a new process for us, so if there are any kinks in this process, be gentle with us because we're still trying to figure this out. And then I'll turn it over to Bill and Thad to talk about the ODTs themselves and some of the technical work that has been going on behind the scenes here since ACES version 1.0 was released. So just very quickly, the virtual working group process. We never really had sort of a formalized development workflow. prior to the ACES 1.0 release. We've sort of gone back and tried to formalize some things since then. This looks like a bit of an eye chart. I'll also post this to ACES Central, but it's not quite as complicated as it looks. This is basically split up into three sort of major sections here. The first is issue and topic identification. The second is community discussion and proposed solutions or proposal, and then solution finalization. The way we kind of envision any virtual working group working or any topic being addressed is first, ACES leadership is going to receive some sort of feedback from the community, either via ACES Central, via direct emails, via user groups who are using ACES, or really just anybody that we hear might be having issues or might be having or might have a need that is not currently filled, need it to be filled. We'll then sort of investigate that topic a little bit to try to determine whether or not it makes sense to really create a virtual working group around that particular topic. And then if the topic is kind of meaty and requires some legwork to be done prior to opening up the discussion publicly, the ACES leadership may decide to form sort of a small task force to research the topic and kind of just frame the subject in a way that will help create a productive discussion once we take this onto ACES Central and have these virtual working group meetings. Likewise, we'll identify a working group facilitator and someone to help us organize meetings, discussions, so on and so forth. And then we'll start the process of kind of taking this public. That'll happen. Most of the conversation will happen on ACES Central. That's where we see kind of the bulk of the discussion happening, with code-centric discussion happening on GitHub, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Ultimately, we really want the community to be engaged in helping us solve these problems, and the facilitator will sort of call an initial meeting to help those who are interested in helping us understand what the scope of the problem is, as well as understand the specific work that's been done to date to both understand the problem and potentially solve the problem. And then what we're going to do is sort of have a discussion about any proposed solutions, the problem on ACES Central and on GitHub when it makes sense to do that around very specific pieces of code. Ultimately, coming out of sort of this second box here, the box label number 2, is going to be some recommended solution and some recommended rollout plan for how that solution would ultimately be integrated into either one or more ACES releases. Obviously, if it's a small problem, it might be very easy to roll it into a point release of ACES. If it's a larger problem, then it might take a series of ACES releases to roll out in a fashion that makes sense. Documentation is going to be very important to us as well. We want to create both documentation around the solution itself, as well as any sort of development documentation. We want to make sure that we document any experiments that we do, any image analysis that we've done, so that in the future somebody can look back at this work and have some sense as to why we made the decisions we made. Ultimately, that'll go back to ACES leadership as a set of recommendations. ACES leadership may take those recommendations and pass them off to what we're calling an architecture review board. Basically, this is a group of people who have worked with ACES for a long time and worked in the development of ACES for a long time, and we'll just check to make sure that the solution doesn't break some of the core tenets of ACES, and it isn't kind of it just isn't a solution that may not work necessarily with the larger system goals. So once that's been signed off on, we will create sort of a final pull request for the ACES community to review. ACES leadership will finalize release plans, and then we'll archive all of the information that we've collected along the way, and open or take that pull request and merge it to the dev branch, and then ultimately to the master branch as a new ACES release. So, like I said, it's there's a lot of boxes here, a lot of steps, but it isn't really all that complicated. So, let's go to the next slide here. This is kind of where we are right now in this process with this particular working group, looking at ODTs. We've heard from the community that there are some desires for ODTs, desired capabilities that ODTs currently don't have. There are a lot of ODTs that people want that we currently don't provide. There are some issues with ODTs, and the ACES leadership formed a small task force that has done some work to look at this problem. That's what we're going to be sharing with you guys today. And Bill and Thad have been asked to be the facilitators on this, and so they're going to lead you through this today. And ultimately, we're kind of in this box right here, this green box that says we're at the initial online meeting to discuss and frame the topic. So, like I said before, most of the conversation is going to happen within ACES Central. ACES Central, we set up an area called Discussion, Design, and Enhancement to ACES, and we actually created a subcategory there called Virtual Working Group ODT. So discussions around this particular topic will happen in that area. So if you guys aren't already on ACES Central, I suspect most of you are, but if you're not, please log on and sign up in there. And when necessary, we're going to use GitHub, and I'm still working on trying to sort of connect GitHub as well as possible to ACES Central. So you might see some more linkages in the near future. But what GitHub allows us to do is comment on very specific pieces of code, right down to individual lines. So over here, I made a comment on line number 2 that said, should this, that was a typo, should this line be updated? So idea here is that we can have very, very specific and granular conversations about very specific code solutions on GitHub. And like I said, I'm working on trying to link as much of the conversation in GitHub back to ACES Central so that we can cross-populate those conversations and not have them completely be bifurcated. But that's a little bit of a work in progress at the moment. So that being said, I will turn this over to Bill and Thad and let them lead you through the specifics of what has been done to date and what we hope to do here in the future. So I don't know who wants to take the lead here, Bill or Thad, but take it away, guys.
Thanks. Bill, why don't you go for it if you'd like?
Okay, sure. So we'll try to give everybody an update here on some of the things we've been looking at the last few months on the output device transforms. And it's just that everybody knows that these transforms are the ones that have been supported and published so far in ACES 1 are pretty limited. I know a few other companies out there have been contributing some for their systems. But just to be clear, documented means there's supporting alternate devices, viewing environments, device dynamic range capabilities, and encodings are needed. So there's a lot of variations that people are asking for, and we want to talk through, to what extent we support these, or we provide tools for people to build their own ODTs. Also, one of the bigger, well, these are all good issues while we're having the call, but ACES 1 doesn't contain sufficient really end user or engineering documentation related to the design and usage of output display transforms. Of course, everybody can go through CTL code, but sometimes that only gets you so far, and you may see over time there's been different implementations, and so some of the methods, ODT to ODT, are kind of non-consistent and need to be relooked at. And so we'd be really happy if there'd be anybody or groups of people out there that would want to work on engineering documentation or end user documentation that we could be posting up more. Someone's put a slide here. Oh, that's just a level of service. Okay. In some cases, the current output device ODTs are actually creating image artifacts, and so we started to we want to investigate that. We've been a little bit limited. We haven't had the I think we just got the X300 at the Academy Lab. But Alex, do you want to highlight any of these image artifacts that people have been expressing concern about, just to give some examples?
Yeah, there's probably the most prevalent one is an issue where we can see gamut clipping occurring when going to relatively small gamuts, Rec 709, from larger gamuts, particularly.
Oh, this is the wide color camera to high dynamic range output or 709, where you get that type of clipping, the AP0, AP1 clipping?
Yeah, exactly. And then
okay.
Ultimately to the display device. So it can, some of the more egregious problems actually occur in the IDT, but or in the process of coming out of the IDT and going into ACES, but we can also see this as this problem occurring in some of the
right. Okay, so there's some issues with like log to ACES and things. So we want to figure out a plan to attack these. And also, I think as some of the users are using the ODTs, they're fixed. We have 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000 nits, and TVs behave quite differently than just a full range. So other people have been running into issues with how do they select a 1, 2, or 4,000 transform, and what those options, what it means to pick different ones. Go to the next page. So these are some of the more detailed issues that we've been collecting. We have almost a slightly broader list up to that will get published. And if anybody can put more up on ACES Central, or just even send us URLs, I think that would be helpful. But there's algorithm consistency between some of the different ODTs because they were built at different times. I think some of it was how like surround was brought in HDR versus the normal ODTs. There's not really consistent methodologies for dynamic ranges other than the ones we've published. I mean, you can't just move the curves up and down because of the way the splines are set up. Surround I just covered. And then Alex, I'm not familiar with the white point compression for D60. I think because that's just the D60 sim, that's just everyone has to be aware of not flipping out of that.
Yeah, the D.
When you're in SDR.
Maybe a little bit too much detail at the moment, but basically the D60 simulation has a compression at the top end, basically a roll-off to avoid change in chromaticity at the very, very high end once one of the channels clips. So that's in the D60 sim algorithms, which are in the ODTs that support D60 sim currently, but it's kind of been customized for each of those individual ODTs, and there isn't a sort of a generalized form of that algorithm right now that could apply to other white points than the ones that created it for to date.
Okay. And then the dreaded PQ equals 0 problem, which only helped for one movie, Interstellar. And we want to look at how to address, you have an RRT setting the tonality of the system, but then you need the ODTs, and a colorist needs to be able to maybe to even meet a deliverable requirement to have a 0 and 1 in the system irregardless. And so we want to have some discussion about how to address that, or how you get to 0. Right now it's kind of an ad hoc or heuristic, not heuristic, it's just kind of an ad hoc method that has been put into the current ODTs. Again, more documentation, more comments, and we can even make GitHub pull requests on comments and stuff, I think would help people, because when you have a question, you can ask on ACES Central, or you can start going through CTL code. And so the more we can make the CTL code a little bit more self-explanatory with comments, I think would help. We don't have rules for like creating new tone scales for different output devices. So if you want to show up with, you've got a 700 nit device and you really need that ODT, how do you make a tone scale that is reasonable in conjunction in the entire system, things like that. So let's look at the next page. Yeah, you want to talk about some of the documentation needs that we have?
Sure. Yeah, so again, I would say sort of the documentation we have right now is almost best defined as the code itself, the CTL code, which really describes what each of the ODT does. But again, having a better description of how each of them work and what they do and how they get to, again, the brightness you want, the saturation, the white point. We need more documentation for that, and we need to know how. So again, if you do your grade first at a DCI projector, and then you want to go up to a 1000 nit EVX 300, how does that ODT work to give you the effect that you want, given the capabilities of both of those displays? Again, the next one is what is an ODT exactly? What does it do? How is it give you a good starting point for the display device that you're going to be using? And what are its characteristics, and what are its limitations? Again, the last one, it's unexplained constants in the code. As I said, the documentation is pretty much just the CTL files today, the code itself. Some of it is hard to understand. There's, as I said, unexplained constants, like what do these numbers mean? That has to be in documentation. So if we build ODTs that are more consistent and work over a wider dynamic range, and have documentation that describes it, it will be a lot easier to understand, and people will make better choices.
Yeah, even if it's just constants that were kind of set heuristically or through testing, as we'll see in some of the library functions.
Yeah.
Let's see, what gamma clipping, we just talked, that's the wide color. Everybody's pretty familiar with that. There's been a lot of discussions on ACES Central. Maybe Scott and Alex, do you guys want to talk about these first tone scale splines? Because I know over the last few months we've gone, back and forth looking at different options for new curve styles.
Yeah, for those who are familiar with the CTL code, you know that we could make use of these splines pretty heavily for the tone scales themselves. The coefficients for the B splines were set primarily through a lot of testing, and they've created they're somewhat complex, and they've created situations where the first derivatives aren't necessarily as smooth as we might like them to be, which can cause issues for some people, particularly those sort of in the animation and gaming spaces. But the bottom line is we're looking to both address those first derivative issues, as well as, where possible, address complexity and better explain where the how the tone scales were derived.
Alex, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Is that something that would be fixed by just the particular spline math that you use? By definition, would have smooth derivatives? Or is it more complicated than that?
It's a little more complicated than that, just because, I mean, the curves themselves are smooth because of the B-splines. The first derivatives can get a little wonky because of the placement of the coefficients and the positioning of those coefficients relative to each other. So you can get kind of like the spline itself is smooth. The first derivative can change pretty radically between the two spline segments, causing some issues in the first derivative. Does that make sense? It's probably a little easier and better shown in graphs, but we can certainly take that conversation and make it much more detailed in future meetings, as well as on ACES Central.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. That.
So, and then there's, as everybody knows, there's not an HLG transform yet to put in at the end of the ODTs, and we're under discussion how or if the community would want that implemented, because we're seeing people produce in HLG and convert later to PQ for live broadcast, and then we're seeing other creative uses of HLG through an entire color managed pipeline like ACES, and so we want to make sure we support it the right way. So because there's all these kind of variables that we went through, some of the issues and things that we found, we're looking at doing, I should go to the next page, some type of adding some parametric parameters to the ODTs, not just to make it computationally more complicated, but actually to try to get better consistency between the set of ODTs that ACES publishes. And so we're looking, Perfect World would really like to get to kind of a parametric ODT algorithm that by just varying parameters, you can enumerate out all of the ODTs that are currently published, and that it would be documented in such a way, or readable in such a way, that others, if they need to make ODTs that diverge from that, would be able to do so for their own products and own particular needs. One thing we didn't mention on the documentation, sorry to go back a second, is we want to get more documentation up on ACES Central. I saw there was like a lot of positive comments on the 4 LMT papers, essentially, that Scott put up there, and so it's like that's a type of examples of where we want to get to in a lot of areas with documentation. So you can read the list here below, but as we all know, there's display primaries are changing. We have 2020 now. We have different versions. We may even have in between 2020 and P3, depending on where new equipment lands and stuff. I mean, we all want to be able to either produce to this when the time comes, or on an experimental basis be able to evaluate different choices. Same thing, EOTFs, gamma restriction primaries. That's one that I believe all the coloring systems have put in a P3 limit so that colorists don't have to use the barber pole warnings on the grading monitors, but that's not been officially rolled into the ACES release yet. Thad, did you say something?
No, I thought it was a funny joke. Sorry.
No, say it. I want to hear.
No, but yeah, exactly. Color gamuts are going to change. Displays today have every home display has a different color gamut, different primaries, and that has to be part of the ODTs in the future potentially.
I have a comment. This is Mike.
Go ahead.
One thing I'm a little wary of, even though this sounds good, is if it doesn't necessarily mean that you actually want to endorse or encourage all of these potential permutations. So even though you can do it, that doesn't mean that you should or it is desired, because once it's possible to do, so let's say, I don't know, legal range XYZ, you're going to start seeing that out there potentially, and that's not helpful if nobody really wants that. And so from a parameters perspective, I find it sometimes maybe a simpler approach is to enumerate the systems that you want to support, but don't enumerate all of them just because you can go through some for loop and loop through all the combinations.
Okay, well, there's going to be in the next few pages a description of how this is going to happen, or here it is exactly.
Okay.
So the idea is not to necessarily create a series of ODTs that you would download and use for whatever you need, that you could build one interactively for whatever task you want. And if you have a particular display that you want to use for your creative master, it's not out of the question. It probably it may make sense that you build an ODT that is specifically for that display and use that as your master, and then you'd use potentially different ODTs for different devices.
Yeah, to Mike's point, we'd actually thought about this quite a bit when thinking about the parametric ODTs, and there's certainly the risk that people can create ODTs that effectively don't make any sense. Like I said, maybe X prime, Y prime, Z prime that's limited to legal range. We think we can address that by effectively creating sort of a set of presets, which would be basically an enumerated set of parameter groupings that then would go into this algorithm. So we put together this wireframe here, and actually, if you go this URL, you can actually try it out. It doesn't do anything other than to sort of change this little UI, but in this UI, what we have is an output transform. So here it's P3D60, and here are the parameters associated with that P3D60 ODT. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll just kind of do this real time here. Let's see if I can make this work for everybody. Need to just share the right thing here. Okay. All right. So this is sort of a theoretical ACES user interface. Obviously not. It's not something we require people to do. But just like today, you might have a list of ODTs in this output transforms box here. The Rec 709 P60 SIM ODT and the P3D60 ODT. I just created two of them for the sake of simplicity, and change to one versus the other. But you also have the option here to go into the advanced settings. And when I go to P3D60, obviously display parameters are P3, the white points D60, no gamma restriction, so on and so forth. But if I wanted to, for instance, make this P3D60 be associated with a dim surround instead of a dark surround, I can change that. And now this preset jumped to custom. Might be able to save that off as a new one and call that P3D60 dim surround. But we would probably ship, sort of a series of presets. And if you looked at the CTL, the only thing in that CTL would be, the specific parameters associated with that ODT, as well as a call to the base algorithm that's taking in all those parameters. But it doesn't keep somebody from coming in here and making sort of a completely ridiculous ODT, but sometimes you can't protect people from themselves, I guess is the idea.
Well, but you have already. You have been doing that, right? By your limited set of ODTs.
We have by providing a set of presets, right? But that doesn't mean that people can't pass parameters into the base algorithm that wouldn't necessarily make sense. Like, for instance, this Rec 709 with an Illuminate E white point. The base algorithm might take those parameters and do something with them, but it's probably not very useful in practice to have that ODT.
I think what Mike is saying is that it's a big change to go from the current release mode where we're releasing fixed ODTs that have given names and can be archived and so on, to a parametric model where it puts a little bit more burden on the user to build the right thing, and also there's a question of archiving and how we refer to these things.
Yeah, no doubt. There are all issues we have to talk through, and just to be clear, this is a straw man proposal that we put together to jumpstart the conversation. Right. Certainly, we're open to hearing everybody's ideas about this, not only about this parameterized ODT, but if you've got a completely different idea about ODTs, we're certainly willing to listen to those as well. But this was this was an option that the group who sort of did the forward work on this felt was worth talking about in a larger setting.
Yeah, Alex, do you have the? I think the one that was interesting is how this would be presented, where the ODT would look like a set of parameters. If you want to flip it to my screen, I can pull up that gist that you had put together 6 months ago, so people can kind of see, to kind of think about it, because that's a good. These are good points. We'd have to think about how you constrain it.
Just like, I mean, everybody on the phone, I'm sure, has dealt with legal and full range mismatching, and it's job security for all of us, right? But
it's not health security, though.
Well, anyway, it's only going to increase. So
yeah,
that's my concern with this, and we can figure out how to manage it. So
that's good feedback. So here's I think this was put up on GIST, I don't know when, quite a while ago, but where Alex had just hypothesized what an ODT might look like here. So this section here is basically, I guess in this case it's a P3D60 ODT, 48 nits. So the ODTs already are only about 15 or 20 lines of code because it's been very modularized. So this is just taking it one step further and kind of, can you express each published ODT and sanctioned ODT as a kind of enumerated vector of parameters. We're pretty close to it already. I mean, you look at like a 48 nit ODT, it's like I said, it's only a few lines of code. But it does have, there you go, right here is your legal range. Yeah, just, there's your problem. So, okay, let's switch back.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Oops.
All right. Can you guys see the presentation again?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so just moving on here. Maybe I'll just mention this real quick. End user documentation. This is something that Jay-Z, one of our new leaders, has been really hammering us on. We need practical documentation for people who are actually using ODTs. I've started a new document around output transforms, basically a user guide. And if you follow this link, it'll take you to Github and a specific branch where I have on my fork where I have a LaTeX document started. Certainly, everybody is willing to or is welcome to not only take a look at that and give feedback, but also contribute if you'd like. But there's a bunch of work to do here on this. So, and user documentation obviously is going to be very, very important moving forward. You guys, Bill, Thad, do you guys have anything else to add on that one?
No. This is we should put that link up on. Is that link up on ACES Central?
It is not yet, but I'm going to add all of these links, including the stuff that has been added to the chat here once we finish up. Thomas added a link to an IPython notebook that he did on some of the gradients and derivatives related to the B-splines that'll also throw up on ACES Central.
Does anyone have any preferences on how you'd want the documentation done? Should it be like on a website like this as documents? Should it just be a multiple readmes or another folder on GitHub with the ACES dev? What's convenient for everyone?
I personally like having that stuff under source control so that you can see the history on what has been changed and everything. Sometimes it provides you important clues like on what happened, you know.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
In this Jay-Z, I just want to mention from my point of view what the documentation should show us. In our post-production world, clients would like to see matching images in dailies. During dailies, for example, there might be a Rec 709 monitor on set and a P3 projector for the dailies colorist, and the client has an iPad. And at one point, somebody mentions it doesn't match. Then they bring all these devices into one theater, into the same viewing environment and compare, and it still doesn't match. And what I see, we have many clever solutions regarding our ACES ODTs, talking about dim surround and talking about adapting to the viewing environment. I think we have to come back to the bread and butter first before we serve the lobster. So the core functionality needs to be given first, and we have to describe first how to which ODTs to use in the same viewing in my environment, which then give the clients the same result on different devices. And this should be the stem. And from there, we branch off and give different versions, taking care of, for example, dim surrounds. And so this is my aim. I want to have this documentation done so that it's easy to understand which ODTs to use for which conditions.
Okay, so you're basically saying, is there pairs or triples of ODTs that could be used kind of in production to keep people in alignment?
Or different parameters for the ODT.
Yeah, so
how do you deal with someone?
Oh, sorry. No, this is Annie. I just wanted to support Jay-Z's comment because it's the same thing on our side as well.
Thank you, Joseph.
Go ahead, Joseph.
So how do you, Jay-Z, deal with, once upon a time, it was considered impolite to bring in a big CRT monitor into a cinema. Most producers didn't do it, but now that you can have a device that properly is showing 709 with a 2.4 gamma outside, in some office environment, and then they can bring that into the cinema and it won't match the gamma of the properly set up 2.6 projector, how are we supposed to make those two match? The issue is a serious one here.
So I can show you. I did the same at Technicolor for the DP Light system, and I do the same at eFilm now. It's the ODT which matches to the 2.6 gamma of the projector and the P3 gamut of the color, and then it's the ODT which matches to the 2.4 gamma of the monitor and the Rec 709 gamut of the monitor. The ODT can make these two devices match. Of course, I have to put the 30-foot Lambert's monitor down to 14-foot Lambert's to get the luminance to match, since the projector cannot do 30-foot Lambert's or 100 nits, but it is possible.
Hi, this is Josh. And let's say that various facilities and entities out there, we've over the years been forced to do exactly, Joseph, what you said. It's like we'll have someone who says, I want to see that monitor in this grading suite with the projector side by side. And we've gotten very, very good at making them match exactly because we have to. And it is, pretty straightforward. I will say there is some viewing surround code in the current ODTs that seem to make that level of matching impossible. I'm not saying that extra viewing surround code is bad or irrelevant, but what Jay-Z is saying is that switch should be optional, and there should be a discussion about which one is the default. Is the default the one that would have them all sort of match better right out of the box if they were in the same room? Or should the default behavior be, well, they don't exactly match, but we've taken, some of this surrounded account. There's a similar question with chromatic adaptation. We run into it, and it's different from show to show. Some people, no, damn it, I want the same exact white point on every single, the creative white point on every single display I see. And there are others that go, oh, no, I definitely want the creative white point to switch when I go to this other thing. So both should be there, and I think that there's a question about which should be the default behavior.
Josh, I'm Jay-Z. I'm not arguing that you can't make transforms that will make one look like the other. Of course you can, and if anyone can do it at a high quality level, it's the two of you. My question is, have you then gotten the clients to be willing to accept that when they bring in a device that was producing the image they liked in a different environment into a theater, that they have to do something to that device in order to get it to match the projector, or that they have to change the default behavior of the projector in order to get it to match the unmodified device that they just brought in? Because if you've gotten people to make that leap, my hat's off to you. I just haven't seen it. Does that make sense?
I see it every day. Yeah, I see it every day that we bring the monitor down to 14-foot Lambert's and show a match. And when the client then walks away to the editorial suite or to the hotel room, they may go up to the normal 30-foot Lambert's. I have seen that they go back to 20-foot Lambert's as well to have something in between. But the core message is that this device can match in the theater with these parameters, and this gives us a warm and fuzzy feeling and we learn to trust this device, and then we walk away with it. And
so what you're saying is that basically it's our job to maintain a color appearance match to the maximum capabilities of the devices as we go from environment to environment. I'm okay with that. That's just not that's not anything that was ever explicitly specified in the design of ODTs as I remember it.
No, well, let me say this is that I think that should be an option, that you should, have ODTs that do exactly that match one display to another, which is an important thing. I completely agree. But on the other hand,
well, it's not just matching one display to another. It's this management of expectation across viewing environments.
Right. Okay. But I'm gonna say that some people,
because it's this transitive closure thing. If they have a reference monitor outside,
right,
and their iPad matches it, and then they bring the iPad into the screening room, right, and you do something to the device in order to make it match the monitor or vice versa, and they take that device back out to the original thing, they have to understand that they have to undo that transform.
Right. An issue, though, is that, for instance, the current iPads have a dynamic range that's probably 10 times what the projector is, and they are P3, which is nice. There will be tablets in the future, which will be OLED that have dynamic range of 1,000,000 to 1 or more, far more than the TV, or far more than the projector, the DCI projector. And people may want to see, okay, this is what we see on the screen. This is what it would look like to match on the iPad. But maybe we should see what it would look like on a high dynamic range display as well. And again, having an ODT that went to that, to show them what the higher dynamic range, what the wider color gamut might be, could be useful.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm just saying that like, yes, the print is pretty tiny for this slide you have up here on GoToMeeting, but it looks like it just straight off jumps in and is very technical, but without saying anything about things like color appearance and consistency and all of that. So maybe there needs to be a separate document that is more explicit about what was sort of vocalized during ACES design discussions, but never formalized.
To be fair, Joseph, I picked the most visually interesting pages, 7, 9, and 30, for the slide. But there is some discussion of that in the actual document.
And Joseph,
okay.
Sorry, this is Josh.
More.
This is Josh. I'm just going to jump in and go, we could argue all day about whether there should be color appearance modeling or absolute colorimetry match. And the fact of the matter is we need both. We need to be able to have something that I can point a goddamn meter at screen A and screen B, and they're actually different color spaces, but have the absolute colorimetry match. Some of our clients demand that, and we've gotten very good at doing that. And it's something, and on the other hand, we certainly want to be able to throw the color appearance modeling in there and be able to get them to feel the same way. So we need both. And there has to be the ability to choose the proper one for the proper instance. I think that's all.
So for the defense of all of the DI facilities that are trying to do their best by their clients, as you are, there should be a producer-friendly, not engineer-friendly, but producer-friendly document with the Academy seal on it, saying that we support both strategies and a little bit of explanation.
I agree. I think, actually the whole question about end user documents, there could be an end user documents for like ODTs, an end user document about all that, but I think there is a bigger question about the end user document about ACES strategy in general, the sort of, okay, I'm starting a show, what do I need to know?
What is an end user to us?
Good question.
Is it the engineer at a facility, or is it the producer who's non-technical?
And it sounds like
this is one of those things where you have use cases and you have, made up model fictitious users and user stories.
Yeah, and we had only tiered up two of them, like two ODT specifications, ODT engineering guidelines. That's somebody like Eclair or Dolby that's written their own ODTs, code comments. So we need to bifurcate these end user documents like you guys are suggesting.
You know, I mean, among one of the other things that has come up, and it's sort of a minor thing, but right at the beginning of the show, there's this big question. I hate to say it, and you know, it used to not be this way, but then something happened, and now it's this way. Is what's the creative white point of the show? I mean, right now there's a clear choice that has to be made by someone. Is it going to be a D60 show or is it going to be a D65 show? Because right now we have like all the ODTs sort of, you know, you cleverly have it hidden under this little check mark that sort of says D60 simulation on and off. And what you're really saying is it D65 or D60? So, you know, this is something that every ACES show that we're dealing with, whether we're involved at the beginning or we're just doing the final DI at the end, it's the first thing we have to ask. It's like, wait a second, what's the creative white point? And it's amazing that, you know, most of the time no one knows. And so that's something that will have to be mentioned in some of this documentation. Thank you.
Somebody mute. Okay, thank you.
Or is it that after Joshua's statement, a fight broke out?
I have that effect on these kinds of meetings. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, we've got this down in the notes then.
Yes. Thank you.
Anything else on the documentation? Because I mean, that's the thing where we're lacking, because it makes it hard for people to talk, makes it hard for people to pitch ACES internally and whatnot. So we really need to all, you know, work on this documentation somehow. Okay, see the next slide. How quick? All right, that's next. Okay, so we got the working group, and I think this has gone on. I think that I don't know what, last November maybe we started. So yeah, we've been much slower than we wanted to be on this. We thought it was just a couple changes, take a look at the tone curves, and would be at, you know, version 104 in a month or two. And we've not found enough significant things that would significant things or low-hanging fruit that would allow like this type of a minor point update. So we're looking at a schedule like this. Alex, why don't you talk through this schedule? This is what, you know, we're going to try to do here through ACES Central and through this new method by getting this opened up a lot more.
Yeah, again, this is pretty aggressive. What we're trying to do here, though, is really prime the pump on the discussion with this straw man proposal. We hope to have this discussion on ACES Central about a lot of the specifics that we've just started to discuss here today. And we'll be adding technical details as well as trying to kick off the conversation about some of the topics that have come up today between now and really the end of November. Likewise, in that time frame, we're also looking for people to propose alternatives. And if we can get some alternatives by the end of December, or excuse me, the end of November, we can have a second working group meeting near the end of November, somewhere around Thanksgiving, or I don't know, shortly thereafter or before, but somewhere around the Thanksgiving time frame, have another one of these online meetings where we can, bandy those ideas around a little bit, and then really start to hone in on some specific solutions between the end of November and the end of January before we make some final recommendations to ACES leadership. Again, aggressive time frame, but it seems entirely possible.
And then Alex, talk a little bit about how, you know, this would fit into ACES next, because we're still looking at kind of continuing to prop up the version 1 system without, you know, substantial changes, but then find a way to move this forward.
Yeah, ACES Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is this concept of what is the next version of ACES, or the next future versions of ACES going to, what are they going to include? The reason we refer to it as ACES Next is because version numbers are really going to be dictated by the solutions and the changes, not the desire to add functionality. A 2.0 might be preceded by a couple of dot releases, maybe a 1.5, maybe not. Again, it's really going to be the specific solutions that we come up with for the problems that we identify, and the enhancements that we would like to see, that are going to dictate the version numbers. But we're just sort of we're trying to determine at this point what are the enhancements we want to see, and once we have a technical plan for how we're going to roll out those enhancements, we can then determine what versions they'll slot into.
Okay, and then Alex, you have from a few months ago, I don't know if I don't have it in front of me, but you have like a work item roadmap PDF. I think the latest one I had was from May, where we had kind of laid out all the items we would want to do in like a point release. And we were talking about things like kicking surround into like a 1.1 or 1. Plus something, because we want to go do testing. That fits right in with the comments we were getting today about matching levels and stuff. So that tiering, I think you should send that around. I think that will help.
Yeah, I could certainly do that. I don't have that handy right now. I didn't include that in the presentation, but I could certainly post that to ACES Central. Again, what Bill's referring to is, we have we identified a bunch of work items associated with this strawman proposal, and I kind of did a rough slotting of those work items into an ACES release schedule. But I could certainly send that around if we think that's useful for the discussion.
And it would be good to get a group of people working on surround and how we deal with that. I don't know if maybe the leadership has fleshed that out yet or not, but the two aspects, right, dim dark and matching. So it's actually two different things. But
I'd just like to point out that Doug and Gary Demos have a paper next week about a rendering thing they've been working on, which includes more of a continuous surround compensation that goes higher than what we did. We really just did dark surround and dim at a 10% level or whatever. So we didn't really cover the whole possible range of interior lighting or office lighting or daylight lighting or any of that. So we always intended it was going to be a dark room, but now we're getting people using things in other environments, and things look too dark when you're in a really bright room.
The other thing to point out about this so-called surround issue is that if you compare the Cinema ODT and the Rec 709 ODT, the differences in there are only partly due to the surround. I would say that maybe even the bigger part of the correction is due to the fact that Rec 709 is twice as bright. So it's that absolute luminance difference that's also a key part of the correction, in my opinion.
Right. Well, my expectation is that the reason that it is twice as bright, well, because the TVs are twice as bright, but also the ambient light for watching TVs is dramatically brighter. So those are both good reasons for having the mid-tone be twice as bright.
I agree.
When the 709 stuff was being designed, was that considering 709 on 100 nit reference monitors, or had we gone ahead and recognized that when you went to Best Buy, they'd all be twice that?
Well, no, it was based on 100.
Yeah, 100 with a dim surround.
Yeah, but we should, instead of just referring to it with the shorthand of surround correction, we might want to come up with a term so that people don't get confused about actually what it's really doing.
And this might be more ACES next territory, but one of our lacks in developing the system, it was not having a consistent color appearance model that we could rely on for these different adaptations that might be needed. And we still don't really have one, or we don't, we migrate to the things that seem to work rather than having a base model on which we can assume this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I can post some papers too to ACES Central about some updates to color appearance models. In particular, there's been some new work that in a paper called entitled like Cam 16 might be worth taking a look at.
Is that an image appearance model, or is that an isolated color appearance model?
That is an isolated color appearance model. But people have been using it for application to color imaging systems and color management. Anyway, I could post a number of links associated with color appearance modeling on ACES Central.
Thank you.
And Alex, just to bring up just a question, I would hope that our second working group meeting wasn't the day before Thanksgiving, because there was a lot of travel around then. So maybe thinking of it.
Yeah, take these dates with a huge grain of salt right now. So we can massage the specific dates as necessary.
Shouldn't some of those latter years be 2018?
Yes, they should.
That's probably a good idea. Yeah.
We're going back in time. We really want this work to be done.
First to get ODTs done, invent a time machine.
Exactly.
We wishful thinking. We would have liked the work to have been done last year. All right. Moving on here. Action items. So just some action items out of this particular meeting. Really, what we'd like everybody on this call and everybody who's ultimately going to watch this on ACES Central to do is to review the ACES development process itself and give us your feedback on that. Like I said, this virtual working group concept is a new concept for us. We're trying to figure this out as we go along. So, we'll refine the process where it makes sense to refine the process. Take a look at the ODT problem statements and tell us whether or not we are trying to solve the right problems from your perspective. Maybe we're missing the mark here, and we're solving problems that are we're focused on problems that aren't problems, or we're not focused on problems that you see as problems and really need to be solved before the things that we've identified. The specific issues, take a look at those as well. Tell us whether we've hit the mark on those. Review this parametric ODT concept. At least we're going to be publishing more on that, but review what we've got to date now that you're at least somewhat familiar with what our thinking is there, and tell us whether that makes sense, whether it doesn't make sense, what the pros and cons are. We've had a little bit of that discussion here today. Certainly, we'd like to continue that discussion on ACES Central. And take a look at that end user documentation. Right now, it's a LaTeX document or LaTeX code that can generate a PDF. I can also post a Word document to ACES Central for people if that's easier. That's pretty easy for me to create from the LaTeX. So we just want to make it easy for you to give us your feedback. And then think about alternative proposals here. What would you do, if it were completely up to you? How would you attack this problem, or these problems, and what solutions would you bring to bear on them? And if you have any feedback about this meeting process itself, the GoToMeeting, the chats, that sort of thing, by all means, just email us at aces@oscars.org. That'll go to those of us who are more involved in the administration of this process, so we can get some of these issues solved. We are aware that we have a limit of 26 attendees. That was not intentional. We thought we were actually going to have a limit of 50. Apologies if anybody is watching this and got bumped out of the meeting. We'll get that fixed for next time for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So. This is not to say that the meeting's over. Certainly, if you guys want to continue the discussion, we can do that. But at this point, this is sort of the end of the slide deck. Maybe I'll just turn this back to Bill and Thad to sort of moderate any kind of discussion that we want to continue to have at this point.
Hey, Alex, first off, since you're asking for feedback on specific things that were in this slide deck, and maybe I missed this and you said it earlier, where can we get a copy of it? Is it posted?
Yeah, this is going to get posted to ACES Central.
Okay,
so the slide deck will get posted to ACES Central. The recording of this actual meeting will get posted to ACES Central, as well as I'll post links, documents, pretty much anything we talked about. It'll all go on ACES Central.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is that. We would like to hear again other responses, other if you have questions or think that we're doing things that are not in the right direction. Please comment now. We're trying to get this proposal finished as soon as possible. So the more information we can get, the sooner the better.
Would it be helpful to have a thread on ACES Central that is kind of requesting people to tell us what ODTs are missing from the 1.0 collection? I mean, clearly we need to add these colorimetric ODTs to address the use case that JZ and Josh were talking about, but it might be helpful to have a specific list.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like I was thinking about like maybe we should establish a list of displays we need and want to support initially, and have people probably adding whatever displays they want. Like I would be keen, for instance, to have support for HDR, not HDR, sorry, HMDs. VR HMDs. I don't know if it's something that has been thought of, but yeah, it's definitely something a lot of people now would be keen to support. So
Yeah, another thing is we did a survey a while back on ODTs, and I've got all the statistics associated with that. I'm going to clean them up a little bit to make them a little bit more readable. But I'll also post that to ACES Central, and that certainly will inform the discussion about what ODTs people are using. Maybe not as it's not as complete and as open-ended as what Doug is asking for. I think that's very useful as well, but it could certainly help bring some context and some information to that discussion.
Absolutely.
Hey, Alex, would you do me a favor and maybe put the PowerPoint on the there are a couple of slides that you had at the beginning that had I think some of the comments that people had that you collected about ODTs. It might be helpful if you guys want to start keep having this conversation. Maybe people can look at that and see if there's anything that's missing off the list.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Annie, should we just go back to that slide on this presentation, or?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is like if you could put that slide. I think you had a couple of slides, but if you could just put maybe scroll through a couple, or just I just thought since we have a little bit of time, it might be good if there's people on the phone that would like to give some comments or would like to add to it, or have a disagreeing opinion, something like that. So. But I know you had a bunch of slides that actually, and since this hasn't been posted yet, it might be nice if people could actually see what information you have collected over the last few months.
Oh, you mean the relative to the survey?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You had. Sorry, I was driving actually when you were showed the screen, so I actually didn't get to see it. But it's the there was a list of things I think it may have come from the survey, or it just may have come from the collection of comments over the last few HDR ODT meetings. But I think you had a list that you were showing earlier in this meeting of different points of things that were being planned to be addressed for the ODTs.
Oh, I think you mean this slide here, the issues list. So we have the
Yes,
lack of
I
consistency
think so.
between OD.
I just see a black screen right now, but
Oh,
Yeah,
are you sharing?
Sorry about that. Let me double check.
It's very dark. Yes. Let's see here. You know what? Just step the room that you had earlier.
Can everybody see this slide?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Is this the one you were talking about, Annie? Or
You know what? Just step through what you have, if you could. Sorry.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So we knew about the documentation. Oh yeah. So so that was the parametric one, which I don't know if other people. I mean, I know we had a pretty good discussion about the parametric and the positives and the negatives about it. So I don't know if more people have any comments about this. But yeah, it might have been the slide before this.
Yeah, Alex, maybe switch it over to my computer. I have that master list that we had collected a few months ago.
Yeah, sure. Bill.
Yeah, that'd be great, Bill. Thank you.
And we can maybe edit it here if there's more feedback. Hopefully you guys can see the screen. I'll zoom in one notch.
There you go.
Okay. There, that's better. So this is a list that we had collected, looks like maybe April or whatever. And so you can see here, but I think these were addressed kind of in the thing we went through today. They were just spread out on different pages. I mean, here's the tone scale one. This one, there's a bigger discussion, and we should have a small group of people, working on that technically. I think there's tons of issues. So I think we did hit all of these. This is the wide AP0, AP1 thing. So, and I think the new one that we learned today is we really need a producer, right?
This is Josh. There's one minor thing. One of the things that you mentioned, I guess people may have complained about it or requested it, is the lack of HLG support. Of course, whenever I mention those three initials, I start twitching. But so one thing to just mention is, I mean, we've when we finish some HDR stuff, maybe in PQ, and then the clients go, oh, and now we want an HLG version of that.
Right.
They're always very, very insistent that those two visually match exactly. So I would probably put it down there as a, I mean, just from experience, a requirement that the HLG support should probably visually match the PQ outputs, but just merely be, formatted, in the different metric, rather than treating it as an entirely separate space. It's just been our experience. Thank you.
Okay.
Which means picking a particular level of brightness for HLG to where you start from, because that's the only one that'll match. All the others sort of change.
Right.
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, what it has been is, in our experience, there's already been a PQ approved deliverable that is targeting a particular NIT level, and then they go, now give us the HLG version. And
at that same NIT level.
Yeah, same thing, same NIT level. Yes.
Okay, and that's the thing that 4 or 5 was demonstrated a year ago at the ASC too. Then, yeah, same NIT level matches the ITU 2390 recommendation.
Yeah, that should be fun.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just important that people not think of ACES as some sort of magic beans that, when applied, will take all of these things that they find difficult to deal with in terms of these new technologies that are coming along, like HLG, and the way that it changes response with certain parameters, and think that suddenly they're going to get perfect appearance matches
right
across all of this. So it's another thing for the user stories.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree. It's Greg Chachu here, and I would also say, in addition to the producer level document, there should always also be some sort of a glossary or an explanation of the terms being used, because they may not be aware of them.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. A glossary, I think, is something we critically need. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Maybe people need some time to think about these items, roll them over a little bit, and continue the conversation on ACES Central. But how's this? Does this feel like a natural break point for the meeting?
Sure. This is Josh. The only other thing I'd like to recommend is that we outlaw any legal range things ever existing ever again, and just kill it. Wouldn't that be great?
Good luck, Josh.
Yeah, I know. It'll never happen.
Do we keep SDI range then, and so we can at least have some choice?
Okay.
All right. On that note, well, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, pay attention to ACES Central, because a lot of stuff is going to be popping up on there pretty quickly, including this meeting itself, recording of this meeting. So please participate in the discussion, and we'd love to hear your input.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
All right. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.